Hey, hello. How's everybody? All right, quick poll here, let's see. How many of you have ever attended a pain point session before? If you have, please raise your hand. Okay, so now I know your hands work, and so when we ask for questions. All right, I'm super excited today because I feel like we finally got promoted. We are finally here. Today's like graduation day for me. We've been sitting on day 3, the last session. There's that many people still here. And we finally got promoted up to day 1. So it's, woohoo! So it's really, really important to me that this go well. Otherwise, I'm gonna get benched again.
I have to say that I never missed your session, Rick. It was always last day, last session of the conference. No matter how uncomfortable travel home might be, I would always schedule it so that I could attend it. Guilty that I often held back, and please don't. I'm sure whatever you're thinking, somebody in the room is thinking the same and might be facing similar issue. I know that what I took away from these sessions over the years is that a lot of issues that we're facing, somebody actually solved. And you go home with a possible solution, a possible standard that you might apply. So please, whatever comes to mind, there already were really good presentations up until this point, especially last one, that went over various standards that could be applied to different use cases that you may be thinking, what is the standard, how do I apply it? And pain points is the source for that.
Awesome. Yeah, and this is we got moved up to day 1 because some of the feedback that we got, honestly, is such great ideas come up, we want time to work on them. And so by doing this day 1, we have a larger audience, more people are able to attend, but we have sessions and we have time dedicated for data dictionary tomorrow, for transport the next day, to really take some of the things that we talk about here and actually start grinding through them, working through them, seeing what we can do. I asked for a poll earlier. For those of you that have been here before, welcome. If this is the first time at Pain Points, this is really your opportunity to complain, whine, bitch, whatever the case may be. People pay $300 an hour for this. You can do it for free right now. But seriously, this is how it is that we get your feedback and we learn about the things that we can do better and how we can improve. And so with that, I'm going to kick us off with just one topic that I got inspired by, I guess. Pain point for me started on the Lyft ride over. I took a Lyft ride in. I shared with Amy and Ed. They were kind enough to share a Lyft ride with me. And right away, as we started talking about what are we going to talk about today, the first thing that came up was data quality. I'm on the client side. I work at Constellation One. We talk to 500 plus MLSs, US, Canada. We bring all this data in. And one of the things that we do struggle with sometimes is data quality. I feel like the standard has done a great job in creating titles, fields, names. But then we do see issues with quality. And so Amy brought up an interesting scenario where she sees a close date that's before the listing input date. And you go, how can that happen? We see scenarios where we get listings that, have clearly changed. The checksums don't match. You can look at 2 records, the past record, the new record, and you can see that they're not the same. But the timestamp didn't change. And so I do wonder, I'll ask you guys, and I'll open it up for you guys now. Do you guys see issues with data quality? And I'm wondering if there's ways that we can really help create testing and standards and things to help us with data quality. Hey, Chris. No, not on yet.
He's bringing it out right now. I got nervous. Okay, thank you. So along that line, I've got other pain points, but around data quality, I've long contended that either subdivision or neighborhood, I can't think of the actual field, is by far the worst field in data dictionary.
Which one was it?
Subdivision, because it's just a free form, anything goes. I know my time at the MLSs, and then also as a downstream data vendor, data aggregator, Lots of fat fingers, lots of different ways to say the same thing, lots of ways to abbreviate the same thing. It's really gross. And so tightening up on something like that would be great. That's just, when you said that, that was the first thing that came to mind, is that's just almost unusable in a lot of cases other than just informationally displaying it. And it would be a great way to bucket listings if we could reliably have that populated.
Okay. We are trying to find a few things we can really focus on in data dictionary, so this could be an item there. Who else?
So this actually can be generalized, this comment, right? There are fields that are free form that could have an enumeration that needs to come from a third-party authority, right? Obviously, data subdivisions might be very difficult for RESO to build up a whole national list, but we face similar issue with school districts and schools and city lists, and we've gotten better, and possibly maybe there is a third party that could provide this data to enumerate free-form fields like that.
There are. I mean, I know that there are. Al?
Oh,
Yes.
there we go. I guess we'll get a little spicy right out the gate. So one of the things that I'm currently struggling with, kind of with regard to that, and this will maybe kind of underpin a few of my comments here, but there's been a lot of rules that have been decided over the past 5 years, but recently, thanks to Josh and his team, the news testing certification rules are really starting to bring a lot of that to light. So there's some instances where tightening down the strictness of the data dictionary testing kind of works against us in this case. My best example is there's some fields that we currently have as enumerations. So we have those as enumerations because we put some of the effort into cleaning that up. However, the standard requires us to expose those as strings. So there's instances where that strictness, while it drives a lot of things forwards, it does kind of pull us back a little bit. So I think maybe in the data dictionary, either rules around allowing, say, strings or enumerations in certain cases, or going ahead and doing the hard work and getting all those fields actually enumerated across the board would kind of drive us forward.
So what pain does it create for you?
For me, I feel like I have to give a lesser quality service to my users by downgrading to strings instead of using enumerations in this particular use case.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's certainly something I guess could be considered. At the end of the day, we do want to provide the richest, best data to people. We want some degree of flexibility. Sam? We have a hand over here.
We have one right here.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Hey, so actually, I'd want to say something very similar to what Al said, but around old data, specifically like deprecated data. Just to go with a generic example of Rob's favorite field, distance to volcano. Let's say like we were using distance to volcano as a standard field and decided that was too vague, and we came up with two new fields, distance to dormant volcano and distance to active volcano. There's absolutely no way to know in the old field what that, like which one it was, like what kind of volcano something was nearby to or anything like that. So we have 10, 15-year-old listings that predate RESO even in some cases, that have data that doesn't make any sense. We're not using it anymore. It's not available anywhere in a current listing, no on-market data, but the certification tool dings us for all of those because it's using a term that's used in the data dictionary, but the wrong way. It's like, well, this isn't gonna show up anywhere. If anybody's pulling it, it's because they're trying to download our entire database. They're going back a long time. So there's no way to have like a deprecated data metadata tag to be like you might find this, but we're not using it kind of deal. And to have something like that to be able to get through certification, and also to just be able to flag specific items we do know ahead of time that say, yeah, you might come across this, please just ignore it, because there's nothing we can do about it anymore, would drastically help with moving the current data around more cleanly.
So some way to actually put an ignore around it.
Yeah.
Actually, he raised his hand earlier, and then so did Paul. Take the mic, Paul.
Oh, take the mic so people can hear what you're saying. Please come to the next transport meeting because we're trying to work on that. Paul Hethman's already brought it up, so it's already work in progress. We don't have a great answer yet, so Any contributions that you could bring forward, examples, that'd be fantastic, because we are actively looking at that. That's one of the things we're working on. Pardon? First Monday of the month at 1300 Pacific.
I thought the correct answer was Wednesday.
We're not
Thursday,
actually
sorry,
doing
Thursday.
it here, though. We're not fixing that problem here. But come to the Thursday one anyhow. Yes, okay.
I'll say we might be, we don't know.
I was just wondering for a point of clarification, as an MLS that has most of the fields as enumerations, for anything that's a pick list, what challenges there? I'm aware of, their string types and the different field types. When you have what I would consider a string enumeration choices, I'm just not clear on what the challenge is. Or is it simply a matter of more MLSs need to have enumerations in their input?
So I think what Al was talking about was actually having to make a change to a string when something wasn't to begin with. And that context-wise could create problems for what that data set is. Do you have an example, Al? Might have been a date field, might have been, well, no, that wouldn't be an enumeration.
Trying to look back to my email to one of the fields I got dinged on real quick. Office country, for example, is currently defined as a string, and we have it as an enumeration. Other association city, association mail city, some of these which I would consider most likely errors in the data dictionary, things that, kind of a self-deprecating pitch, things that we could have fixed if we had been more vocal about it or noticed these things in the data dictionary work group a little bit sooner on. But yeah, in general, it's the act of changing, any enumeration changing to a string due to being forced by the standard. Again, feels like a downgrade.
Okay. Does that?
It's almost like you have to have a different data type, whether you look at it from an entry point of view and from a read point of view, right? For whoever consumes data to display it, string works great. But to keep data accurate, of course, you need a predefined list of values.
Yeah, I think we're having, this is not surprising, so retrofitting is always going to be hard. To the point he brought up.
Oh, sorry, didn't know if it was my turn. So there's, you'll see tomorrow at the Data Dictionary Work Group, so you should attend. There is a shift that's going from a consensus basis to a convention basis. String fields for things that are pick lists in property, but strings in residential were intentional. It was the way the data sources were created. You're also going to see a shift from MLS being our roots to our roots being based on a much broader scope as well. The caution to this is with all change is pain. And with the expanded 2.0, this is a really good taste of the pain that's caused by altering things. Because when you have now an enumeration being tested when you got away with it before, I think it's a really good example of what we're in for and how we need to be careful on how we govern ourselves with change. So we'll be talking about change control as well.
I think this is also very related to some of the Data Dictionary 2.0 work that's going on. I'd be curious to know if there's anybody out there that's trying to get certified now, running through tests, having issues. Pain points would be a great time to bring up what your actual experiences are, what's happening.
Or those who have certified, congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, I understand.
Would be cool to hear what you guys went through and maybe share some of the lessons learned.
I know someone.
He's shaking his head no.
Absolutely not. What lessons have you learned, Joseph?
Absolutely.
Would you like to share with the group?
Way to go, Dan.
Thanks, Rick. As per usual, I will pay you back later on. Testing-wise, part of the biggest frustration we had actually was caused by me and the fast track sub work group, where we were standardizing enumerations while we were trying to get certified and subsequently getting ourselves dinged by having RESO clean things up faster than we could make the corrections, clean things up in terms of the enumerations and lookups, suggestions and testing faster than Grid could go back and make the corrections to the actual data. So the suggestion I would make is, while it is trial and error, try again to see what you do come up with. The first thing you need to do before you even attempt this road and path is clean up your lookups. And that is, you're going to spend an inordinate amount of time, wasted time, if you haven't already cleaned that up. Spelling errors are going to get you in trouble. Incorrectly, dashes, spaces, all these little things are going to come back and frustratingly bite you in the butt over and over again, and you will find yourself up at 1 o'clock in the morning staring through pick lists looking for where somebody fat-fingered, dishwasher. So, and preparation is going to be key. Otherwise, you're just going to get frustrated and text Josh in the middle of the night. He'll be up, but you shouldn't do it anyway.
We all know that, yeah.
And probably say some 4-letter words to him about your process. All in all, the process is good. It did great by us eventually. It was just a lot more trial and error than I think we anticipated. So.
Okay.
Okay, I have a couple. I'm Kathleen from Remax, and there's 2 things. One is a follow-up to what Dan said on close dates. You would be surprised how many listings come through with close dates nearly a century in the future. So it'd be fabulous if there could be some constraint put on how far in the future they can put an estimated close date. And I think that one to me seems like a slam dunk. You just have to pick the range that you're going to allow. The other thing I see, I do a lot of comparison between current feeds and the API feed. And I see a lot of MLSs where the data, there's being a shift between active and active under contract. So the translation between an MLS status is not being consistently applied, and more often than not, it looks like some are being classified as active when they really should be active under contract. So it'd be great if there was a little bit more attention paid to that.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of MLS. I wish I had the stats in front of me. Interesting for the tool set for tomorrow, but interesting to know how many actual statuses there were. Does anybody know, top of head? We talk about MLS statuses before that were active under contract.
About 500.
Yeah, it's got to be a ton, and somebody's got to map all that to.
But
Is it
then
active or is it under contract?
So, Rick, and this is another good example of this meeting ends up sending a lot of issues out to different groups. So we had a couple work groups already. That might be an issue that's more of a business issue that we need to work with CMLS or NAR on best practices to advise MLS organizations if that's as far as we go. So this is where we get these great ideas to collaborate with other organizations.
Okay. Hi.
Hey, Rick. Just to add on, thank you, Kathleen, for that, because I was going to bring that one up as well about the dates. That also applies to year built. I'm pretty sure nothing's being built right now in 2042, but the system is letting that go through, among other things. So it would be great if that same type of logic could be applied to fields like year built. Another couple of fun ones, days on market. Pretty sure they shouldn't be negative. They should also probably not be 40,000. I've seen it all. So having those kind of limits where we can, check some business rules and say, what's today's date and are these really valid?
I certainly see them. We talk to most MLSs at this point. I absolutely see these things. I'm not quite sure what the right solution is. I'm not sure how you actually really enforce this. I mean, it does seem to me, though, a lot of these things can be tested. You can actually write things, you can test against it. Test is only as good as the time it was taken, but it does feel like these are things we could code against and actually Maybe there's badges, maybe there's certifications for high quality, things like that. We've talked about writing a lot of things as far as best practices and publishing that stuff out. So MLSs, technology vendors, others have an idea of the impact that these things have, and start to code in to kind of harden and make it a little bit more, a little less error prone, I guess, I think would be really beneficial. All right, let's continue. What else do we have?
Pain point of agent roster data. So things like photos of agents seem to be missing quite a bit. Coming from the vendor side, getting the data, trying to pre-create things for agents so that they actually adopt it. If they don't see their photo on it, the adoption goes down big time. So that's something that's missing. And then social media links. We could even go as far as Google business pages, websites, agent pages. There's just, the way I see it, there's at least 8 essential sites out there. Google Business, Facebook Business, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, maybe Realtor, Zillow, Homes.com. We can choose what we want to include there, but I think some of that could be relevant, whether it's on an association website in the member directory, or it's in the MLS when an agent's looking up another agent. But just starting with the face would be a great connection point.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, measuring completeness is certainly one of the things that Josh has tried really hard. Josh is the CTO of RESO. He's not able to be here today in person, but I'm sure he is watching. He's done a lot of work on the reports to try to really call out where there is completeness, how many vendors, MLSs actually populate any given field. And so some of those reports are pretty awesome to look at. I agree there are deficiencies, and it's amazing to me, something like an agent photo where you really want to advertise a listing is not always there. I don't know if that's a thing of education, letting people know, the importance of how it gets used. But yeah, I see that as well.
So, I mean, to follow up on what Alex said, I think the broker advisory work group is working on some of that information in terms of having it as part of the data standard. But I would agree, like as a broker, it is very, very challenging for us to populate any of that information, and we're relying on our agents to do that. And you all know, I mean, they're not putting in the information in the MLS. But I wonder, is it a requirement, right? Should an agent be required to input a photo and input a cell phone number and input an address? I mean, all of those things get downstream funneled for the broker. We're having to auto-populate that on the back end, and it's a nightmare.
And so make sure you get to the broker advisory meetings because Nina's our vice chair there, and that's where we get a lot of these issues. One more follow-up on the same topic.
I think I just want to follow up on that comment. I think if we had some data available from vendors that demonstrate this dependency, once agent information is fully populated, the hits on the profile go up, right? You can't just tell agents you have to do this. You have to show them what's the benefit for them. And seeing this data, it goes both ways, right? We have, Data Dictionary has fields for all kinds of social links, anything you want is there. But we can't force agents to put data in unless we show this benefit. And I think maybe collecting a little bit more impact of these fields being populated might help.
Are you sure you can't force them? I mean...
In that video with
passwords
carrot.
Can stop working.
Carrot.
I'm just saying.
The carrot.
So I guess related to rosters and other things is member type, which if anyone is familiar, I think every MLS has their own distinct version of member type. I counted before I came. There's over 2,200 distinct member types across all of the MLSs in the US and Canada. And so, again, when we're looking to consolidate or we're looking to see how many agents there are, what type of agents, all of this gets really, really difficult. So yeah, there's a lot of work I think we can do with rosters and that data.
Yeah, I'm catching that.
I just suspect, I've heard mandatory or required agent roster data several times. I don't think anyone who said that has actually ever tried to force a realtor to upload. No amount of carrots are going to do it. You're always going to have the realtor like Richard who flips you the bird and says, I'm not uploading my photo. I mean, you're never going to get it right.
Since we're talking about agent data, I think previous session touched a little bit on duplicate records for the same person, right, for the same agent, especially in data shares. And when you roll out a product or service in the area where service area might be shared by different MLSs, right? And both sides of transaction might be represented by agents from different organizations and how you reconcile all of that. So I'm curious if there are issues, if people are facing any issues around that, and if we have a good solution for something like that.
Cool. Andrea here from ZenList. My understanding is you get sample data from each one of the systems that are plugged into just for audit purposes and such. So one of the problems that we keep encountering is inconsistency between the values within lookups. And it's actually a simple problem to solve, because if you do have all the data, what you can do is just sort a field like appliances or architectural features and then figure out what are the top 50 and, touch them up a bit, but figure that out. Because sometimes, even using the current lookups, there are values that are used by many systems that are not in there. And at the same time, there are tons of values that, I will never have a use for. So maybe an audit on those values would be extremely useful. And because it's data-driven, it seems to be simple.
So collecting the information, I agree, is simple. Agreement on it, as someone who was there day one at CRMLS when we created the first draft of the data dictionary that exists today, getting agreement on it, simple might not be the first choice of words that I used.
Yeah, but if you sort them by usage, there are some fields that are used 2 times.
Analytically.
Across the systems, right? So the point is just like data is not an opinion.
And analytically, I absolutely agree with you. I applaud you. I'm totally in line. I have seen struggles but there's 3 markets where this is what works in our market. And it is a tough one.
To add just quickly, though, to that point, that is what we're trying to do with RESO analytics in a lot of cases. So we can't always tell an agent what the agent needs to do, but we can certainly see that there are 500 local MLS statuses and 2,200 member types, and give some more context to the people who are making those decisions about which fields are used and which aren't. And if we can use those analytics to provide at least those reference points for folks, we do get what you've said is some really good guidance on what we might need to add or what we might be able to consolidate.
Yeah. I see it too, and I always wonder, aren't there legal implications? Oh, she said, what about square feet? Do we have any kind of validations on something like square feet where she sees it's 1 square foot? And I'm like, yeah, I see the same data sets. I know some markets are really good about it. There's legal considerations that you take into account in how you're advertising a listing. But I do see that as well. I think that's a great example where some type of validation of data would be really, really, really helpful.
Yeah, so in regards of the data share that you had brought up, we do an IDX consumer website. Of course, we're dealing with hundreds of different agents, hundreds of different agreements. And of course, California, you guys have lots of data shares. And I literally have to download the same data from all these different MLSs 5 or 6 times to have it. It's a lot of redundant data, but the way I read the rules, I can't take, if I have an agent on MLS listing that happens to have a CRMLS data share, I have to use that feed, and I can't take my CRMLS data feed on there. And so there's just this huge amount of waste. And actually, sometimes I'm hitting their photo API or their photo endpoints because they use those URLs that I'm downloading just terabytes of additional images that I really don't need to have because they are pretty much the same thing, but I'm treating them as its own feed. So there's just a lot of waste there. And I don't know if there's a way that we can say, hey, if you are on this agreement, I'm on MLSListings and I already have this data, can I just use that feed and not have to download that? And that would be a great solution for me. And maybe a little more management of paperwork and understanding that and stuff, but yeah.
So I think this question goes out to MLSs.
I'll comment on that, and then I had another thing I wanted to throw out there. But yeah, I completely agree with you. And one of the challenges that we all have is where the authority is for licensing and those decisions. And I think that would be a great area to where, again, maybe this is more CMLS, and NARS even set some policies, like requirements around turning around IDX. So I think it's appropriate. And it could start with a group here, I believe. But one of the most powerful things that I've found, I noticed with, I think it was some of the green work initially, then power production was another. One that was one of the strongest cases was around accessibility features, is when you leverage an authority. So the accessibility features came from HUD, came from the company that actually defines this stuff for HUD. And that's why you'll go look at some fields in the dictionary and the definition is terrible, right? It looks like somebody concatenated things in a spreadsheet. And then you see some that are really robust and exacting and have measurements and all that kind of stuff. And those are one such case. Today, it was brought up to me that there's such an authority for architectural style. And I know we just got done with it. But if there's an authority, I have found that when people come up and they say, hey, well, what about this? You can refer them back to that authority. That is really strong because you've got a group there that's potentially very big and strong from a standpoint of really analyzing things, that they're actually tied to legal standards and requirements. So if you have any such cases, definitely bring them forward. They really make a much more stable environment for us. Like the challenges I've had to accessibility features, generally when I point out where they come from, they go, oh, okay, sounds great, thanks. And that means we don't have to change it, which is another plus in my book. Thanks. I like to have a chat, you know me.
So to walk through kind of a use case there that you gave, we've been talking about some validation and some data quality stuff. Rob, in that case, I recall, I think it was last RESO session where somebody brought up there is actually an authority on architectural style. And there's kind of a dictionary to this that's been globally vetted. And so in a case like that, an item like that gets brought to you. You then take a look against the data sets that we have. We use Josh's tools. We figure out, hey, what do we have out there? How does this match up? Where is there replication, duplication? Where are things not really getting used? And then you bring it actually to the people. So anybody who's part of Data Dictionary can then vote on things and decide, yes, I really need this, I don't need this, I agree with this, I disagree with that, before changes are actually made to dictionary, and then we're asking people to actually make a change. It's a process, but it's very thoroughly vetted, correct?
Yeah, but errors, to Al's point, do happen as well. And I think I'm pointing that out to emphasize that, when something's voted in, it goes into a draft, right? And your chance to alter that begins. And even when we get to where we've closed the version, right? And we go in, which now happens in the fall, and we go into the next, starting to accumulate in the next version, it's a comment period. And so if you see something in that period and point it out, it's still fair game. And one of the concerns that we had that kind of brought an emphasis to our process, which is another thing I'll be talking about tomorrow, is then we start getting into a RATA post-ratification type of situation. And we really want to avoid that. And that's solved in a number of ways. Process and policy are part of them, but participation is equally as important when we go into the draft, taking that time to take a look. I always do it from a standpoint of I want to cover my rear end, so I want to get started early and looking at what kind of changes I'm going to have to tackle and how I'm going to have to tackle them. Because if I see a concern, I want to bring it back to the group where it's still malleable, as opposed to after the fact and I really have to implement it and there's nothing I can do about it.
Okay.
Yeah, implement it and there is nothing you can do about it. That brings me to another pain point that I know we've gone through several times is backward comparability of standards, right? Let's say, standard needs to move forward and obviously keep improving and evolving. And one day I'll have to map the new architectural styles that came from the third-party authority to all the architectural styles that were defined in our system 10, 15 years ago. And we'll have to go through that.
I think we're probably seeing a lot of that now at 2.0.
So I'm going to shift over to Web API a little bit. I was going to ask this question in my presentation on Thursday morning, but there's most certainly more people here now than there will be at 9:30 on Thursday, especially after going to the distillery. So just a quick little exercise here. So raise your hand for me, please, if your company is working with Web API, if you have a Web API implementation. Keep it up if you have actually written a custom library to do that work. Keep your hand up if you're actually writing that code yourself, not your team, yourself. Keep your hand up if you do not have any customization in your Web API code that says if it's this vendor or this specific feature or this actual account. If you have your hand raised, you get a drink from me at the bar at the end. I do find, I think there's still, we early on in Web API, and especially with adoption, we wanted to kind of steer away from driving any business decisions. We want to stick to the technical aspects of Web API. But I'm one of those. I've been writing a client on my own, kind of on the side, and running into lots of these little scenarios where it's following spec, but it's not equal across the industry. It's to pull data in this certain format, you have to do it on the third phase of the moon on a particular month, or you can't do the same sort of replication quality or replication process that you do on other accounts. I personally, and I know I've said this before, I find in RETS we have that solved years ago. It's basically the same across most vendors. So I think a lot of vendors are doing a really good job of at least putting that information out. Somebody was talking about the implementation documentation. I think it's coming a long way, but just continuing to, if there's something specific about your APIs, make it publicly available. Most of the big players are doing a really good job of that, but reading it on a document doesn't help my code. I still have to put conditionals in to get things working.
Part of the conversation I had on the way down here, again, with Amy and Ed, we talked about, we run into pain points as clients, we run into problems, and we just, natural thing is you have to solve them. And so you write code and you solve them, and you create the if it's vendor X, and then you kind of forget about it and it's there. And I think all of us have this code that's out there, and all the clients out there have this code. I wonder if there's some way to gather this, organize this, put this together, because tomorrow there's going to be another company that needs to do this, and they're going to hit those same walls, and they're going to run into the same bumps. It is a little tough to organize, but that actually would be a really good, I think, use of time. I think all clients, I don't think there was a single hand up at the end there, so you're well
There's
played.
one hand up, Rick. He's on the live stream. He wrote the RESO certification utilities. They're not vendor specific. His name is Josh Darnell. So that's one person that you can write in for now.
Yeah, that's true.
Jamie Cipolla from Realtor.com. Along these lines, I think, the pain point is it's difficult when each vendor has their own restrictions around searchable fields. It would be nice to set a baseline standard across the board so that you don't have to implement bespoke logic for each separate vendor you interact with.
That was one of my thoughts as he was talking. That is actually a really good recommendations for standards. I think right now it's generally considered what our best practices, and we talk about that, but we don't have enforceable requirements. Should we change? Should we make it standard? I don't know. I mean, honestly, I'm not involved in the, what is it, RESO, the T-Red, Red T, the technical one. But I wonder if things like this are coming up and how questions like this are getting answered. A lot of people are waiting for that, Sam. Just saying. No pressure. It's a great point, Jamie. Absolutely great point. Something we do see and very legit. Something we probably can talk about in the work groups too.
So I'm going to pivot just a bit off Web API. So if you've got Web API thing, you want, okay. So what I was going to say is I feel like when it comes to the standard, we kind of are conflating two things or confusing two things. We have Web API and then we have data dictionary. And I know this morning in Sam's presentation, there was a quote from Eric, and I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, where it's talking about the standards let him onboard a feed in 8 minutes. Totally. I've done that many times, but it's not Web API that has facilitated that, at least for me. It's adherence to the data dictionary. If I've got a predictable payload coming in, I don't care how it's coming. I can onboard a feed in RETS in 8 minutes just as easily as I can Web API if I know the data is coming in, if it's coming in standard, if the enumerations are good. And I think too, just looking at RESO stats and pulling this totally off the top of my head, so please correct me if I'm wrong on these, but I think industry average right now in a certified feed is 44% of the fields and 14% of the lookups actually match the standard. So I know real estate is local and I know it's very regional and you have to support that locality to some extent. But I have a very hard time believing 56% of the fields and 86% of the data is so local that it can't fit in the standard. And I feel like maybe 2.0 might be addressing some of this. Unfortunately, I've kind of been out of the mix for a bit here. But I think when I put my data consumer hat on, that was one of the biggest things and biggest challenges we had was migrating over off of all of our legacy RETS feeds onto Web API to get a standard, when in fact it's marginally more standardized than what we were getting in RETS. And in most cases, because where I've been kind of existed before RESO standard, we were already mapping to a non-RESO schema, which we never really migrate off of, and that was a business decision, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I think if we could focus a bit more on making sure the data coming through Web API matches the standard a little tighter, and the local fields are really local fields and not just things that, we couldn't easily map it and we didn't want to have a discussion. I think that would be the big unlock for this more so.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We see it all the time. Appreciate the stats. I assume that came from Josh's reports. That is actually a really big catalyst of Data Dictionary 2.0, is exactly what you just stated. There is going to be, Josh and others have been warning, the tests for 2.0 are going to be a lot stricter. Data has to match metadata. The dictionary is going to be enforced at a much stricter level. And so we're all kind of, I think we have 4 certifications on 2.0, is that right?
Yeah, there are four companies certified so far. And additionally, on Chris's point there, a lot of what we're doing now is taking those mappings that large aggregators have, some decisions are made sometimes by an MLS administrator as to how something's going to be mapped. So we had contributions of mappings from large data aggregators, and I hope I get all of you in this, but Constellation One, Tribus, Realtor.com, Zenlist, all helped us out with their mappings. And to your point, there are a lot of things that continue to need to be mapped into the standard that can be there, and to make things more standardized and less local, except when they need to be local and custom, and those situations do exist.
And it is tough. We certainly see fields that are quote unquote custom, local, that definitely have a home in the data dictionary in 1.7, 1.5. It is a challenge. How to enforce it is a little trickier. Josh and his team are doing a lot of work to try to catch a lot of it. I think as 2.0 advances, we're going to see a lot of improvements. Time will tell. We need to get some more work done. But it's out there. A lot of the dev work's been done, and it's now time to get certified. And so, for people out there, Start testing, start working. I'm sure Josh is happy to work with anybody on, let's start taking a look at data. Let's see how we can advance things, learn early on. There's a lot of reward to being an early adopter. I know it's scary and it's tough, but to be out there in the forefront is pretty cool and something you can brag about as well.
So Eileen Romito with ZenList over here, and this ties into this conversation exactly, and maybe 2.0 certification is going to solve this problem, and it'll be a moot point. And I say this at the risk of somebody jumping up in the room and saying, off with her head, but has there ever been talk, and I imagine there probably has been, but in the same way that MLS has a mechanism for members to report violations and an enforcement mechanism around that, has there been a consideration of RESO providing the same mechanism for vendors to report violations and an enforcement mechanism for those violations?
I can say, just practically speaking, I have reported things to Josh, to others, hey, I'm seeing this stuff. Some of it has been corrected, some of it was not. Sam, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, but I don't know there's a formal channel. Informally, I've certainly done stuff. I'd love to hear from others, if others have.
I think also the RESO analytics tool that Josh runs against each feed. I mean, it's not reporting, but you can have an idea of a system, how their metadata, what it looks like, how many fields are implemented, and how much data is actually populated. So before, I mean, it doesn't answer your specific question, but what I'm saying is that there is a lot of intelligence already about different systems in the RESO analytics. You might want to check it out.
Yeah, and as I think about this, we've certainly called MLSs, in the past too. We've called vendors, we've talked to, the Trestles and the big guys and said, hey, we're seeing this. A lot of stuff does get fixed that way. Not always, but often. Sam, any thoughts on a way to identify and call out people that are, maybe some of it's a mistake? Maybe
A lot of times that's it. A lot of times it's just an explanation that maybe the data producer doesn't realize something's happening in their system that is not the same server that got certified. So just so you understand from a policy perspective, if you're going to get a certification, the system you're getting certified, you make a declaration that that is the data that's available in that format in production for customers. So it can't just be a magic server and then all the other servers work differently. That's what the declaration says for certification. So we do get these reports, and members can report to us, hey, what I'm seeing available to me is different. And there are lots of different ways that companies can have 5 different endpoints and implementations, but they need to have that data available in a RESO certified format, RESO compliant format, to maintain the certification. If they were to not be in compliance, not be able to produce compliance, and we reach out to them first, it's usually a conversation and it usually gets fixed that way, technically their certifications can be revoked if they can't provide evidence that in production what they have certified is available to customers. So that's the policy. Usually it's a conversation, and usually the data providers say, oh, we didn't realize that that's what we were doing here was a little bit different than what we did in the certified side. But in the past, there was a lot of manual validation. So some things probably slipped through the cracks. This is all automated at this point. The reports that come out show you exactly what was on that system, and that's what should be available in production to customers of that data provider.
And I certainly have seen, compare Josh's stuff to what I'm seeing, and it not match. It certainly has happened. Bill, you ever seen somebody who maybe where the things didn't quite work, didn't match up?
Dan wants to go with that one.
Brad Whitrock, Maris MLS, St. Louis. It's a bit of a shift in topic, but I'd like to see us revisit contacts and saved searches.
Okay.
Primarily, my thought process in this goes, if you can capture a lead, if you're a brokerage and you're capturing a lead, what should stop you from being able to access an API, feed that data back into your MLS, generate a link to whether it's Paragon Connect or OneHome, whatever it may be, and you have your client set up in under 10 minutes and you're firing out emails back to them. I mean, we're really good at the listing side of things, but I feel like it's a little bit lacking on helping the people who are trying to serve the other side, which is actually getting the listings purchased, helping that side of the transaction.
Okay, fair. I honestly don't know a ton about the work that was done. I don't know if anybody else could speak about some of the things that have been done on safe searches. Anybody else want to step out? Okay. Rob?
Yeah, it had a certain extent of practical application to it. Contacts, I recall there were some different options. There were some existing standards out there. We kind of went more with what was in the systems, but there was some influence on that. Safe Search, it was about creating a framework for criteria. But as somebody who's implemented trying to handle and exchange safe searches, it's vastly more complicated. That framework was fine and all, but it was a very tiny part of the problem. I think the comment earlier, just to mention what is our allowable search criteria, would definitely help with that. But you know, when you start getting into business rules and decisions, that's when standards can stifle innovation. So you got to be careful. And then, you know, actually coming up with a syntax for the criteria, a common one would be another one to help standardize. So I think there's possibility there, but I think if we get the tech folk to the table, differences in how that criteria would be formed and stuff like that would probably be a first thing to look at as well.
So I would like to see MLSs get certified before they force the vendor to go to the API, because sometimes I feel like I'm being their QA, finding the bugs where certification would catch it. And one of our things that we now ask them a lot of times is, have you been certified? Right when they send it to us. A lot of times they say no, and they're still like, this is the deadline, you have to go by it. And I'm like, it doesn't work. And it would be caught if it went through the certification process.
Legit. We have certainly volunteered a couple different times to help people work through things. Yeah. You could always say, no, I won't accept your data. Not an option.
Maybe it could be added into that handbook you guys have for MLSs saying, make sure you get certified before pushing the vendor to do it.
There's tremendous, I mean, he's very right. As a pain point from the client side, it is so helpful when somebody has been certified. We saw something earlier today, right? Who was it? Where somebody got certified, so he tested a certified, MLS went down and he brought it up in under a day. Eric, it's Eric, right? So the fact if you're already certified, it does make life on a client side so much easier. It really does help. Certifications really matter. They really do improve. They really do help the industry and people working with your data be that much more efficient. It's unquestionable.
Hey. I just also wanted to say, you know, I work for RESO. My name is Greg. We keep track of all these pain points, things that you're bringing up. And some of the ones that we talked about at the last meeting, we've evolved. It's the association management system, the idea of getting roster data somehow certified. Like, we're really exploring that right now in interoperability. And there's a little plug for roundtables tomorrow. That's one of the subjects. Another one that I thought was really good last year that we didn't come up again today, but I think it's in our brain, is a wiki for local fields. I mean, we all know that there's a lot of local fields. I don't know how we would explore that other than listing them all out, which brings me to the idea of a list. My guy from ZenList brought up alphabetizing a field and looking at all the enumerations. That's exactly what we're doing in the fast track subgroup. So a plug for that. It's every time we have one of those meetings, we attack something new. Appliances was one of them, I believe. So come to those as well.
You said certification really helps. I think I want to take it one step before that. Adoption of standards really helps. And we've been focusing right now on data dictionary and web API and transport, but there are other really useful standards that came out of RESO, right? Like Universal Property Identifier and ULI. And I would love to see more adoption of those.
He's putting on his jacket for this.
Hold on. Yeah, you know it's bad. All right.
Should I be concerned?
So we've heard a lot about certification, and I just want to reiterate what Sam said earlier. 2.0 is much more difficult to pass. We've only had 4 people pass so far, and they had to put in a lot of work to get there. When they started, we had zero vendors were passing, 0 MLSs were passing. It is much tighter now. Also, there are tools written that you should be considering injecting into your build pipelines to run as part of your development process so that when you come to get certified, you can at least have some confidence that you've already built it mostly, correctly. And I'm going to say it again, I think it was 5 or 7 years ago, we're going to keep cranking down the screws on this to make data better and cleaner. So be ready for 2.1.
Asking the engineering teams to actually put in those tests into their builds also prevents things from getting corrupt and from falling out of compliance in your day-to-day changes. You know, things come up and you have to make changes to systems, you have to change stuff. It happens. Having these tests built into your own code pipeline, so when you deploy changes, you actually do a fast test to make sure I'm still in compliance, is a great way to stay in compliance. And this code's already written for you. Josh and team have already wrote it. It's out there. It's in Git. Certainly you can email transport@reso.org, and you can certainly get all this information sent to you. So info@reso.org. There you go. So, okay, what else do we have?
Anybody want to talk about property types and property subtypes?
No.
Well, that was it. Lots of no's, but lots of laughs.
Anything else you guys want brought up? We have dictionary tomorrow. We have transport coming up Thursday. Any issues you can think of, this is a chance. Kyle?
Don't let them get out on time. It's pain points. Don't let them finish on time.
Oh, we got Al first. I'm sorry.
Please go ahead. I had enough floor. Go ahead.
Okay, so I have a really dumb, easy one. But I have managed to embarrass myself at least twice recently in the data dictionary wiki for not understanding what a term meant. Or sorry, in the DD forums because I didn't understand the term in the wiki. One around synonyms, one around data types. So the pain point I have here actually is when we're just doing the manual bit, nothing automated or anything. There's no resources that'll actually confirm anything in there. Like it just says data type number. And I'm like, actually, like a little I button that I could click on, and it would just be like, a number is defined as anything that doesn't have letters in it. Would actually be super helpful. Just the tiniest little help like on each one of those items. So.
Okay. That's a good point.
So I'm sure that I'm not the only company who won't allow Josh Darnell's code to run on my production or dev servers. So many of you know they're working on APIs to be able to call out and run these tests remotely. Any idea when that's planning on coming out?
I do not. Do you?
I know it's being worked on.
Oh, yeah.
9 priorities right now, and some of them are higher priority at this moment. So it's definitely top 10 and higher.
That's fair, and I'm sure, I'll check with Josh, but I'm sure his answer would be, if you really want it, help me work on it. So
That's a good point, though. Not everybody can actually just take code. And you do got to be really careful about this kind of stuff. But an API would be a great way to do it. Agree wholeheartedly. Yeah.
So something to recognize with regards to the wiki, like you'll see something that says string or suggested max length, right? Number. You need to remember that these are business rules. These are not proper ways of expressing data types. So it was done with intention. If we need to change something about that, that's certainly what posting into the dictionary work group in Confluence is all about. But it comes up every once in a while. So I think that's something that everybody should be sure that they recognize.
Steve?
What he just said kind of leads back to the old data thing.
We have people online, so just
I'm on my way.
grab the mic.
I'm old.
What Rob just said kind of leads back to the old data thing, and it was a little conversation I had with Joseph about 20-year-old listing where the data type didn't match the suggested data type, right? And Joseph wasn't the only one that emailed me. A vendor emailed me and said, can you fix these 10 listings from 20 years ago? And I'm like, I'm not going to fix 10 listings from 20 years ago. Just get over it, right? So maybe there could be some other combination of
So who's
a
raising the
date?
middle finger? I'm just curious.
Yeah, a date or something that kind of indicates, and oh, not only was it a 20-year-old listing, it was a 20-year-old listing we got from another MLS when we bought them, right? So, I mean, something that just says, who cares about that old, that off base?
The person that cares is the guy that's got to write code for the exception when it doesn't work. That's the guy who cares.
My answer is ignore 20-year-old listings. And to the point about the vendor complaint, I agree. There needs to be a channel back because 50% of the time vendors are right all the time. So I'd only want to hear back from most vendors, is what I'm saying.
Does it come natural to you, being an ass?
I didn't catch that. You weren't on mic, Dan.
Are we starting to show our data producer versus data consumer stripes in the room? Do we need to split on opposite sides?
I mean, I had an opinion. We can go. What else do we have? Anybody? Anybody? One last.
So I'm seeing a lot more homeowners reaching out to us as a website vendor asking to remove their property. I don't know what the best practice is for, because again, I can remove it off their website, but that doesn't really help them overall to get it off the internet. So I wasn't sure if there's a good policy that we can push that stuff to the MLS, or, you know, I don't even know what to tell them. They have to talk to the listing agent who did it 10 years ago that they have the house still online. So yeah, just need to find a way to address that.
That's definitely a policy issue. We could talk later about stories on court documents and things, and I understand why sometimes people do want their pictures removed and people do want listings removed. It's a thing.
And less nudie photos in the MLS would help too.
Say what?
Nudie photos, you know, things that shouldn't be in the MLS.
Hour, everybody.
I worked at Realtor.com for a long time, and they may have, we may have come across a few of these. The camera roll upload, that's the entire camera roll. AI solves all our problems, including this one, so you're golden now. We got you. All right. Anything else? Questions? We could cover rate limiting, sure. What would you like to talk to about rate? Bring the man the mic. He's like, oh, no. No. I feel like we've had that conversation.
Can you give our moderators a hand?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it so much. Thank you, guys.